Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Development Standards. I hope you're all well. Do we have any apologies?
No apologies, Convener.
Declarations of interest. Councillor Nicholl.
My apologies, it was on mute. I have to declare an interest in item 10. I am currently the tenant of the ground in question, and I will leave the meeting.
Any other declarations of interest? I have a declaration of interest as well. Item number 10, application number 21/131. I'm very well acquainted with the application, so I will also be leaving the meeting. No other declarations of interest? Move on for noting agenda item 3. This is for noting committee membership, which we'll look at later. Is that noted?
Convener, apologies for interrupting. I think that's actually the minute that you're looking at. If you could go to the agenda, the item 3 and 4 are the delegated building warrants and delegated decisions.
Okay, I've got to go. Okay, agenda item 5, building warrants. The committee is asked to note that during the period the 10th of May to the 4th of June, a total of 66 building warrants, 1 demolition warrant and 5 amendments to warrant has been approved with an estimated cost of £7,376,445. Is that noted?
No.
Agenda item 6. The committee is asked to note that during the period the 8th of May until the 4th of June, a total of 60 planning applications have been approved, 2 refused under the scheme of delegation to officers. Is that noted?
Noted.
Convener, that doesn't tally with what's on my agenda. It wasn't the period. We're looking at the period 5th of June to 30th of July.
Well,
are you still on the minute?
On my delegated decisions, the committee is asked to note that during the period the 8th of May to the 4th of June 2021, a total of 60 planning applications have been approved and 2 refused under the scheme of delegation to officers.
I'm sorry, Convener, that is not what was on the agenda.
Convener, if I could direct you to the agenda, please. Item 3 and 4 are perhaps slightly different to the piece of paper that you're looking at. I think that's the last one that you're looking at.
So that's what I.
Convener, would it be helpful if I was to read out the numbers for you?
Yes, okay.
If you can't get the agenda up, okay.
Convener, can I also ask that Sarah goes back to building warrants, because the figure that you read out is not the figure that I've got in front of me. That's why I went and checked. So I could ask Sarah to go back to building warrants as well, so that we get the right figures.
Of course, if that's all right with yourself, Convener, I can do that.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so my apologies, Convener. I think I've maybe confused you this morning. So item 3 is the building warrant. So the committee is asked to note that during the period 7th of June to 30th of July, total of 144 building warrants, 1 demolition warrant and 34 amendments to warrant have been approved with an estimated cost of £10,242,516.
Okay, Councillor King, does that satisfy you now? You're on mute anyway.
Convener, if you could just ask, sorry, Convener, through yourself, if you could just ask members their agreement to note.
You agreed to note, committee?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed, yes. Okay, right.
Agreed this time, yeah.
So,
again, Convener, if you would like me to do the delegated decisions.
yes.
Okay, again, the committee are asked to note that during the period of 5th of June to the 30th of July, a total of 103 planning applications had been approved and 1 refused under the scheme of delegation to officers. And again, Convener, if you could just ask the committee to agree to note.
Agree to note?
Agreed.
Agreed.
So now back to the agenda, to item number 6.
Convener, sorry, this is item 5 is the minute. So if you could just change your numbering on the agenda, please. Thank you.
So the minutes of the previous meeting, that's agenda item 5, I have that.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. The minutes of the previous meeting, those approved.
That's approved.
Agreed, yeah.
Yeah, those are agreed, yes. So we'll now move on to agenda item 6. Members of the Development Management Review Committee. Sarah, are you going to give us an update on that? Well, I would be moving the first option to bring the committee up to 6.
Convener, Councillor Laurie and I have had discussion about this,
Yes.
and we have no strong feeling either way, and we are happy to leave it as the existing 5. Neither of us intend to join the review committee.
Yes.
So if it makes it any easier for you, we're certainly happy to leave it at the existing option. Can't remember if it's option 1 or option 2, but the option that keeps it at 5.
Right, that's very helpful, Councillor Cheap. Thank you. Okay, well, I would be moving that we move the committee remains at 5, and I would move that Councillor McLaren to the committee. Would that be approved?
And I second it.
Any comments or any amendments to that?
Agreed.
So that's agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, so that's Councillor McLaren bringing up the Development Standards Review Committee to 5. Everybody in agreement?
Yeah.
Yes.
Agreed.
So we'll move on to item 7, which is application for a change of conditions at Carlugie, Carlugie Hotel, Carnoustie. Alan, could we have the slides on this one?
Thank you, Convener. As you've indicated, this presentation deals with items 7 and item 8 on the agenda. These 2 applications are applications under section 42 of the Planning Act. And as you'll see from the report, those are very specific applications that seek to allow development to proceed subject to different conditions than those attached to previous planning permissions. The detail of the applications that have previously been approved doesn't change. We're not reconsidering the principle of the development. It's a very simple question, and it's what conditions should be attached to the planning permissions. So just in terms of the developments we're looking at, you see an extract from the local development plan map before you. At the top right hand side of the screen, we have the C6 land allocation. Now that's the land allocation that makes provision for employment development to the east of the former Carlugie Hotel, the Carlugie area just to the north of Carnoustie. Also draw your attention to the C8 identified on the plan, and this is land that's reserved for the realignment of the public road as it runs between Carnoustie and Muirdrum Village to the north. So again, members will note from the report that planning permission was granted in April 2018 for a number of developments that allowed for the formation of the employment area and also for the realignment of the road in the area that we see just identified by the C8 allocation. Applications before you don't change the detail of those proposals. The proposals remain as previously approved by committee in April 2018. Those permissions are standalone permissions. Those permissions can still be implemented irrespective of any decisions that we take today. But we are being asked to review the conditions that are attached to those permissions. First application, item 7 on the agenda, deals with the employment area itself, and you can see the red line that identifies the extent of the site. So in April 18, committee granted approval for around about 19,000 square metres of floor space within this area to accommodate business, industry and storage and distribution type uses. That permission also allowed for the realignment of the section of Carlogie Road that runs through the site, just roughly in the area identified by the cursor on the screen. Now, the conditions that were attached to that permission are reproduced at Appendix 3 of the papers before you, and you'll see that they deal in general with issues related to road safety, phasing of delivery of infrastructure, accessibility of the site, drainage, construction and operational noise, distribution of uses within the site, and general conditions that seek to safeguard the amenity of people in the vicinity of the area. Now, none of those conditions are proposed to be subject of any significant change. What the application has been submitted to do is to review the detail of the landscaping proposals as they relate to this part of the site, and also to alter the phasing of the delivery of that landscaping. In terms of item 8, again, you can see the red line application site, this time located at the bottom of the screen. Again, this provides for realignment of a section of Carlogie Road just as it leaves the town to link into the realigned road that would be formed through the industrial area. It provides for a suds basin just to the north of the town, and an outfall to the Lochdy Burn located just to the west. So again, the detail of this proposal is all as approved previously in April 2018. What we're being asked to consider are the details of the landscaping, and in this case specifically the timing of its provision. So just to remind members, this is the detail that was approved in 2018. You can see the realigned A930 public road as it runs through the industrial area and connects to Carlogie Road in Carnoustie. This detail unchanged. Again, you can see the distribution of the buildings that were previously approved in 2018. Again, that is unchanged by the detail of this proposal. On this drawing, you can also see the landscaping, specifically the landscaping to the south of the site, just in the vicinity of a raised beach area. And conditions attached to the 2018 permission require the landscaping to continue to wrap around the eastern boundary of the site and to incorporate native landscaping. And that's one of the changes that have come forward in the detail that we're now being asked to consider. Again, just an image that shows the generality of the development as it's approved. You can see the realigned road running north to south. We have properties, existing properties. This is the coach house at Carlogie, the existing A930 road located just to the west of the site. And you can see the distribution of buildings within the development itself, and an impression of some of the landscaping that would be provided in association with the development just between the proposed buildings and the existing properties themselves. The applicants provided some information in relation to the intended phasing of the overall development. So the blue area that you see on this drawing represents the phase 1. This is the early stage of development that would take place. And again, you'll notice there are conditions attached to the planning permission for the employment area that require the roadway to be formed before any other development takes place. So we'd have the realigned A930 provided at an early stage, The yellow area represents a phase 2 and the pink area represents a future phase 3 of the development. A phasing plan that's been provided with the current application, and there's some detail relating to this in the papers before you. Indication is that the landscaping associated with the road would be provided at the same time as the road itself, or in the first planting season following completion of the road. So that would happen at a fairly early stage because the conditions require the road to be in before any other development takes place. Again, we have landscaping proposed around the southern boundary, that's between the town and the employment area. And again, the conditions require that to be provided at an early stage. And you'll see this plan differs from the previous one in that it includes landscaping wrapping round the eastern edge of the site itself. In terms of the detail of the planting, you can see woodland planting along the southern boundary, wrapping around the eastern boundary. We have the area within the centre of the site, and this is currently subject of a tree preservation order, along with woodland planting at the northwest of the site. This was approved by committee, I think perhaps November 2018, the tree preservation order was agreed. And the proposal is to improve the planting within the central area of the tree preservation order. And you'll also see some specimen trees indicated on the western boundary. And again, you'll notice from the committee report that we're suggesting that some of this planting should take place again at early stages within the development, having regard to the presence of the A930, which would be retained as a route and likely to be used for recreational purposes by people in the area. So just to provide a soft edge to the development to mitigate the impact of the overall development. But the nature of the planting, the timing is generally acceptable, subject to the slightly revised conditions that you see in the recommendation before you. Moving down to the area covered by item 8 on the agenda, we have hedge planting that would run the length of the realigned road. The detail of that hedge planting is appropriate. Again, it's specified in the reports before you. Slight alteration to this is in relation to the timing of the delivery of that landscaping. Current conditions require the planting to be provided within the first planting season following initiation of development. The revised conditions would require the planting to be provided in the first planting season following completion of the realigned road. So the planting still provided at an early stage, but perhaps a more pragmatic approach which avoids the potential for damage to planting whilst works carry on. So the generality of that arrangement is considered acceptable. Just an aerial photograph. So we have the employment area identified roughly in the area that we see here with the cursor. You can see the existing woodland safeguarded by the tree preservation order, where we would have the existing planting in the woodland area identified by the cursor augmented. Planting in the area that we see roughly here, just round about the top of the raised beach, to provide some mitigation in relation to views from Carnoustie to the south, and the realigned road sweeping roughly in the area that we see here to the east of the properties at Carlogie. So as I say, the detail of the proposal largely unaltered. It's really just the landscaping that we're looking at. Again, just the northern part of the site, you can see the properties, San Melito and the coach house in the area here have landscaping separating those properties from the business uses that would be located to the north, and we have landscaping located to the south and along the eastern boundary with Westhaven Road, which runs down the eastern boundary of the site. Another slide, this time just looking to the south. Again, we have the San Melito property. Again, new road sweeping up in this area. So this is the area that's covered by item 8 up to roughly the hedge line that we see here. A suds pond formed in this area. That necessitates the relocation of the existing entrance feature into the town. And again, you'll see that the relocation of that is covered by conditions in the recommendations before you. But the generality of the proposal remains compatible with development plan policy. Just a final slide, just showing what a lovely day it was in Carnoustie and what a beautiful place Carnoustie is. The gateway feature that would be relocated, the coach house at San Melito, the woodland within the application site, and you can see the skyline where the new planting would be provided, and hedge features certainly characteristic of the area, and that would be planted the length of the realigned road. So the detail of what's before you is largely unchanged from what you've previously approved, and the revision to the conditions in relation to landscaping are considered appropriate, subject to the slight revisions as detailed in the report before you. Thank you, Convener.
Right. Thank you. Move back into application number 7 first. Do you have any concern on application 7? Councillor Cheap. Unmute, you're not. David.
Sorry, I couldn't see whether my hand was raised or not. Thank you, Convener. Mr. Hunter, it's a quick question on this one. No objection really to it at the moment at all, but do we know the reasoning why they are making the application for the adjustments to the landscaping?
So I think the conditions as proposed required all the landscaping to be provided at very early stages of the development. And I think that's the very detailed wording of the conditions. It wasn't really the intent of the conditions. The intent behind the condition was to ensure that the strategic landscaping, the landscaping that's really important around the periphery of the site, was provided at very early stages. And that's what the application comes forward to ensure. Requiring the landscaping, the very detailed landscaping within the plots themselves, it's less practical as development takes place. Any landscaping that's been provided within the plots themselves at an early stage could be damaged. So it's really a practical response to deal with the detail of the matters.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. That's all. Thank you.
Any other questions? No other questions? Comments?
I have my hand up, Convener.
Oh, sorry, where are you, Councillor Moore? Okay, Councillor Moore. Comments? Was it?
No, it's question.
Questions. Okay, Councillor Moore. Questions.
I'm looking at the slides and slide 45. Well, page 45. The artist view is very nice, but I presume it's about 40 years in the future when the trees have had a chance to grow. But when I'm looking at really page 47, and you're talking about landscaping going in at an early stage. But looking at the plan, along the A930, the bottom section of the site, and above the site, it says that is phase 5. How long do we reckon it'll be before they reach phase 5 of the development?
So I think the detail in the committee report itself explains that phases 4 and 5 are associated with the realignment of the public road. Now, the conditions in the report indicate, I think quite clearly, that the road is required to be provided before any other development within the site takes place. So as a consequence of that, the landscaping associated with the realigned road will happen at a very early stage within the development proposal itself, and in likelihood before any buildings are constructed, or at least in conjunction with the construction of buildings on the site. So the phasing numbering on the plan identifies specific areas. The committee report before you provides a little bit more context in relation to when those phases will actually take place. And again, the conditions in the report provide some clarity as to when we expect to see those phases come forward.
Yeah, if I can just follow on to that. You started by saying that the planting would be when the road was developed, and then when the road was developed, or when the road was developed and the first buildings were being completed. There's a difference to me there. One is that it's done straight away when the road's developed, and the other is the developer's allowed to go and put some buildings up and get people in before they start thinking about the landscaping. That could be a 1 or 2 year difference.
So the phasing conditions, if I kind of direct you to the conditions in item 7, Councillor Moore, and I think perhaps give me a second whilst I confirm whether it's condition 1D or condition 8, but one of those conditions is quite specific in terms of when the landscaping is required to be provided. I think it's condition 8. So you'll see that it breaks it down into phases 1 and 3 and also phases 4 and 5. So in relation to phases 4 and 5, all planting shall be completed within 12 months of the completion of the realigned A930 road. Again, directing you to condition 1A, completion of the alteration of the road is required before any other development takes place. So the combination of the conditions is ensuring that the landscaping associated with the road is undertaken at a very early stage in the development.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I maybe moved on rather quickly. No other questions. Okay, comments? If there's no comments, I'm quite happy to move this forward. I go along with the idea that Councillor Grace, your hand's up.
Yes, you can, convener. I think Mr. Hunter, in his final slide of the presentation, when we were looking at that, he said that it was showing the beauty of Carnoustie. Well, Carnoustie is a very beautiful town, I think, but what the slide was actually showing was the beauty of the countryside that surrounds Carnoustie. And well, the applicant has permission now to change the use of that land. That's been granted. And what we are here now to do is to decide if a change in the conditions is going to really be acceptable. And I think that these conditions, the alterations to conditions, are very much a pragmatic and practical approach to this situation. The development has to be phased, and I see no problems with this at all. And I think that we'll land up with a different landscape to what there is just now because of the change of use of the land, but I think that this still has the potential to be a very attractive piece of countryside at the entrance to Carnoustie.
Okay. Now stage.
No
No.
comments, convener.
No.
No.
Okay, so I'll move on then. I'm quite happy to move this report, go along with the phasing of the landscaping, because as Alan said, that in the process of the building, it could be you put in landscaping fully and then you get damage to it. And I'm quite happy with this report. So I'm moving this report with conditions for approval. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. So therefore, application number 7, report number 230/20 is conditionally approved. We'll move on to agenda item number 8. We're at this stage, questions to the officer on agenda item number 8. No questions? I'll
No
give you
questions,
time.
convener.
Okay, move on to comments. Councillor King.
Yes, thank you, convener. I agree with Councillor Brazen on the last one. These two sites are linked together, and I think the phasing of the landscaping is entirely sensible. I'm only hoping that this eventually gets on the ground. It's been in the pipeline for many, many years. I'm very disappointed that nothing's happened so far. And I just hope that this adjustment to the phasing gives the developer the incentive he needs to get cracking.
Okay. Any other comments?
Just me, convener, I think.
Okay, Councillor Cheap.
Can I just concur with the last two speakers, and particularly with what Councillor King has just said? We are seeing development in Carnoustie in Upper Victoria at the moment, building a business park there, but housing is coming first there. It's good in this instance that this hopefully will allow the developers to get on with this now and give Carnoustie much needed employment space. I am aware of one or two businesses in Carnoustie that are actually now having to move out of Carnoustie because of lack of development space for them to actually operate their existing businesses from. So the quicker this is done, the better. And the precursor to that, as Mr. Hunter has said, is that the road is developed as the initial phase of this. So I'd welcome an early start this as quickly as possible.
Right, thank you, Councillor Cheap, for those comments. Any other comments? I'll give you time. No other comments. Well, I'll be moving this approval as it's detailed in the report with the conditions attached. So therefore, application number, report number 231/21 is approved. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, move on to agenda item number 9 on our programme. For our agenda, I should say, this is for a development at Buick Drive, Arbroath, an application for erection of 46 houses and associated works. Could we have the slides, please?
Thank you again, convener. Item 9 on the agenda relates to a planning application that provides for the erection of 46 houses and associated works on land at Buick Drive, Arbroath. And we have an extract from the local plan map. Application site itself located in the northeast quadrant of the town, just the area identified in brown. Now this is an area that's safeguarded for housing development. It's an area that is allocated to see housing development take place, and committee previously granted permission for the erection of housing development on this area in August 2010. So again, this is an application where the area that we're looking at has permission for the use that we're looking at. There is permission to build houses on this area. Applicant is looking for a slightly different mix of house types within the site itself. So just in a little bit more detail, we have Montrose Road at the left-hand side of the screen, the Mackie Motors Golden Lion Garage located again at the left-hand side, Seaton Road located at the right-hand side to the east of the application site, and Bearford Road located to the north. So the section of development that we see here is either constructed or in the process of being constructed at the present time. The area identified with the red line currently has planning permission for the erection of 39 houses, and the application is seeking to alter that to increase the number of houses to 46. So the current permission provides for the erection of 39 detached, 2-storey, 4-bedroom houses. And you can see them just in the general area that we see here. And you'll note the road alignment within the development. That's largely unchanged. This section of road, Earl Matthew Avenue, is out with the site. So this section of road has permission to connect from its current point. It stops round about here, but it has permission to run through and connect to Seaton Road. That's unaltered by this application. What we're looking at is the reconfiguration, the remix of house types within this area. Just draw your attention to a few points on the current plan. You can see the boundary of the application site runs down roughly here, so you can see the approved relationship between the buildings at this point, the approved relationship between buildings at this point, down this area, and at the bottom southwest corner of the site. If we move on to the current application, you can see that the relationship between properties, the existing and proposed properties, remains changed. It's fairly identical to what was approved, what could be built at the current time. The application increases the number of units, but what it does do is increase the mix. As I've said, the approval provides for 39 4-bedroom properties. This application provides a mix of 2, 3, 4 and 5-bedroom properties. We have some semi-detached properties that we see just in the areas here, and we have some terrace properties in the northeast corner, as well as the detached properties similar to those previously approved. Again, just draw your attention to the fact the road alignment, the continuation of Buick Drive, fairly similar to that which was previously approved. Slight alteration in that we have a parking court arrangement associated with the terrace properties and associated with some of the semi-detached properties. Other significant changes, we have provision for a footpath connection running down Bearford Road and connecting through to Seaton Road. So you'll see there are a number of objections to the proposal. Some of those raise concern about pedestrian safety on Bearford Road, and this permission gives opportunity to improve that situation. Again, some of the objections have raised concerns regarding lack of play space within the development. Now, there is play space approved as part of the overall development, and you'll see that we're proposing a condition that indicates no development within this area until the play park provision is actually constructed. But the general distribution, the layout of houses, you'll see is fairly consistent with the pattern of development within the development that's previously been approved. In terms of house styles, there's a mix within the development, a greater mix than associated with the existing permission. We have terrace properties, so this is a street elevation that just gives an impression of the development as it would be seen from Bearford Road. The section that we see here is the section just on within Buick Drive itself, so just roughly looking at the area that we see in here. And the final section we have is looking at Seaton Road itself. This is a worthwhile elevation, and it shows the parking down the side of the houses, which will hopefully minimise the dominance of car parking on Seaton Road itself. Some images of the development. This is the junction of Bearford Road at the right-hand side of the screen and Seaton Road at the left-hand side of the screen. Provision for landscaping, the terrace properties on Bearford Road fronting on to Bearford Road itself, with their car parking located to the rear within the parking court configuration. Looking at Seaton Road down Earl Matthew Avenue, the avenue, as I say, previously approved with associated trees within the public realm, and planting on Seaton Road itself with the car parking down the side. And again, just another view. This is looking at Earl Matthew Avenue, a pedestrian link running through from Earl Matthew Avenue towards Bearford Road, the terrace properties and the communal parking court located to the rear of the terrace properties themselves. An aerial image shows the development as it's being constructed at the present time. Application site forming roughly the area in the northeast quadrant of the site. So roughly the area identified with the cursor. Bearfold Road running to the north, Seaton Road running to the east, and you can see the existing properties as they have been constructed and as they would bound the application site. Again, we have a number of representations that are raising concern regarding potential amenity impacts during construction, and you'll see that we've proposed a condition which seeks to regulate construction noise. So some additional benefit over and above the existing permission and some safeguard for the residents of the now occupied properties. This is looking in an easterly direction, easterly direction along Buick Drive, towards the application site just located beyond the fence that we see in this area. So basically a continuation of the pattern of development that's been established within the area. Looking from Earl Matthew Avenue, looking back towards one of the constructed houses, you can see it does have a stairwell window, but adequate separation distance between the proposed houses that would be located within the foreground of the site, affecting the stairwell window rather than affecting any habitable room windows. Again, looking across the site, you can see it's ready for development. It's allocated the 39 houses. You can see the existing properties located to the west of the site. The relationship between the proposed houses and between the houses that are currently approved would be very similar, so no greater amenity impacts associated with the development that's currently proposed. And indeed, as I've indicated, some control in relation to construction noise and some specific conditions that deal with phasing, which hopefully address some of the concerns that have been raised by residents. And finally, we just have a view. This is looking down Earl Matthew Avenue itself. You'll see some residents have raised concerns regarding the adequacy of car parking, vehicle speeds on Earl Matthew Avenue. You can see it as a tree-lined avenue. This is a photograph that was taken maybe around about 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, weekday morning. So undoubtedly there may be people who have travelled to work, but no particular indication that there's a shortfall in parking. And the parking provision that's indicated within the current application site complies with the council's parking standards. Earl Matthew Avenue, the connection through to Seaton Road is unaffected by this development. There is permission for 39 houses on the site at the current time, and the increase to 46 units is not considered to give rise to any significant issues in terms of road traffic or pedestrian safety in the area. The proposal complies with the development plan allocation for the site, and it's recommended for approval.
Right, thank you, Alan. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Convener. Mr. Hunter, there's a couple of questions really. One is, a lot has been said about the play park. Whereabouts is this? Is this the the section below future development?
So there is a 2009 planning permission. There is an approved local equipped area play which lies to the southwest of the application site. So there is an approval that provides for the formation of the local equipped area play, and you'll see that the conditions require the play area to be provided before any development takes place within this section of the site.
Yes, I'm just concerned because we're talking about extending the number of houses by a further 7. But when I look at the plan, we've got all these houses and I do not see where the local equipped area for play is. And if we're talking about it being on the southwest corner of the site, that means that children who are in the northeast corner have quite a distance to walk to access it. However, is there any possibility to reduce the impact on existing properties for construction traffic to come into this area from Bearfalls Road?
I think how the site is accessed by traffic is a matter that the applicant is best to address in terms of any health and safety assessment that they've done in relation to the site. My expectation is that traffic would most likely access this part of the site from Seaton Road. I think there is an existing access on Seaton Road, and that's likely to provide the main access point for construction traffic. But I think that's really a matter that would be best informed by the applicant in relation to a risk assessment.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No other questions. We've got one speaker. We've got great.
Conveners.
I have a question.
Sorry, Councillor Dunno, convener.
Where are you, Councillor? Right, okay, Councillor Dunno.
Thanks, convener. Mr. Hunter, I have concerns about the suds on the original site of the Stuart Milne site. The suds provision at the moment has only got big signs up saying watch out for deep water. Now, considering the site, the amount of children that will probably be on this site, we're now going to have another suds drainage placed on this site. Could I ask that the applicant can put some kind of coverage on the suds drainage to protect children from falling in? Because there'll be a lot of young families on this property, and obviously young children who escape from houses can't read signs that says deep water. So it's quite concerning because one of the fences that's at the actual garage at the moment has got spars missing from it, has been missing for about 6 or 7 months. And there's children from other housing estates visit the shop there. This is maybe slightly older children, but they could actually go through those spars at the back of the garage and be straight into that suds drainage, and there is nothing to stop them going there. So really worried about suds and accidents happening. So if there could be some provision for some kind of covering of some kind that would protect the suds drainage, but also stop children from falling in, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
So if I can just confirm, there's no suds basin proposed as part of this application, but this application would feed into suds facilities within the wider site. But that's not part of the development that you're actually being asked to consider today. But there is a representative of the applicant in attendance, and I'm sure they'll have noted your point, Councillor Durno.
Yeah, that would be great. I just thought when I seen on the plan there, it looked like there was a blue circle that looked like another suds drainage, but that's maybe the original one. Maybe not looking at it properly, but that would be good then if we could get some kind of work done on that for safety reasons. Thank you.
Councillor Cheap.
Thank you, convener. Councillor Dunno brings up a good point actually, and I hear what you're saying, Mr. Hunter, about it's not part of the application, but I think as councillors we have obviously a duty here of safety as well to all this. What can you just tell me as far as suds creation is concerned, and I see that, in the previous report we looked at in Carnoustie, clearly there's suds creation there as there's in many places. What is there any preconditions to these sort of things being created for signage to alert to not necessarily deep water, because I've just read of a poor man drowning in 4 inches of water very recently, particularly for children and things. Is there any condition we attach to creation of suds for signage, for warning, to cover ourselves and to alert people to the dangers of them?
So my understanding is that developers are required to undertake a risk assessment in relation to any SUDS basin or any SUDS facility that's actually provided, and that risk assessment would inform the mitigation that's required. I don't particularly want to get into a debate about SUDS basins. You know, in our growth, we've got Kepty Pond, there's the Swanee Ponds in our growth, Forfar Loch. These areas are areas that we do find typically in our urban areas, and yes, it's appropriate that safeguards are put in place. As I say, those safeguards are typically informed by a risk assessment undertaken by a developer.
Any more questions to the officers? I'll give you a bit of time. No other questions. We'll move on then. We have one speaker. Oh,
Councillor Duff has his hand up.
well, Councillor Duff, where were you?
Sorry, convener. No, without wanting to continue on SUDS, I think Councillor Darno does raise a good point, because I know I had there was an issue in a housing development in my ward where people were concerned that children could fall into the SUDS pond because it hadn't been properly protected by the developer. As part of eventually, once this site is completed, that presumably the council will adopt the roads from the developer, and that obviously depends on the roads meeting a particular standard. I don't know, this may not be Mr. Hunter's area of expertise, but does a satisfactory protection of the SUD scheme form part of the adoption process by the council, by roads department? Is he aware of that?
So you're right, it's not my area of expertise, Councillor Duff, but very few things are. My understanding is that the SUDS pond is most likely to be adopted by Scottish Water, and as part of the adoption process, the developer does the risk assessment, and that helps inform that adoption process.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that clarification.
Again, the applicant's in attendance and will probably be able to provide a little bit more context in relation to that.
Okay, are we finished with questions to Alan? Okay, we'll move on then. We have with us today Craig McKinley, the applicant's agent. You have 5 minutes, Craig, to do your presentation.
Hi there, good morning everybody. Thanks for letting me attend this morning. Yeah, I'm Craig McKinley. I work as Chief Designer for Stuart Mill Homes. I've been there for just over 22 years. So I thought it'd be nice today to at least give you a bit of background, understand where we were kind of coming from, and I'll try and capture maybe 2 or 3 of the points that I think you guys have raised as well. So yeah, as you quite rightly say, probably about 18 months ago now, literally when the kind of pandemic kind of first hit, we really wanted to set out and have a real positive drive, a positive response to the global pandemic as it hit. So really, rather than furlough a lot of the staff, we managed to set up an internal design team committee. And in doing that, I took some of my breadth of knowledge that we've been working with Architecture Design Scotland for a number of years, and that was about placemaking, spaces, health and well-being, and what we could do that as a positive contribution to any area that we were looking to seek development in. Not only that, but I've got personal as a pharmacist at the infectious diseases ward. So she firsthand was being hit at the time, you know, what were the problems that were kind of coming round with the whole kind of global, with the COVID pandemic. And it was about all the kind of things that we could do, you know, just as I say, to make things better. So a lot of these new house style mix, you know, I think that in itself, it creates just a positive place to kind of live and bring up in. And as Alan kind of quickly pointed out, we've got 2 beds, 3 beds, 4s and 5s, whereas before we had a slightly different kind of look in life, probably back in 2010, and it was really just 4-bedroom detached houses. So we wanted to work with some of the knowledge that we had. We wanted to kind of take some living information that we had with people, and most of it was to do with internal changes to houses in terms of what you do when you come home, how you can manage to shower, clean hands, wash up, you know, that kind of diversification of house styles, the ability that clients could maybe convert garages as you've got a kind of growing family or aging family, as you maybe want to move your mums and dads back in with you again, and actually how the kind of garages would connect to utility areas, downstairs shower rooms, and how you could do that as, again, the developer being responsible and doing that kind of upfront and first hand. In terms of Angus Council, you know, you guys have got a design placemaking guidance that came out in October 2018, and it was about taking that on hand. And as you say, I think we had it fairly saturated with probably integral garage house styles. What we're looking to try and implement here is the potential for looking at maybe some little kind of 1-bedroom coach homes that might happen in the future. We've managed to consider some 2-3-bedroom homes in here. We've also got the all along Earls Matthew Avenue and along Seaton Road. We've managed to introduce, you know, the detached garages or little driveways up the side. So we've done a lot of changes in there to allow that to kind of happen. You'll even see that we've kind of pushed and pulled. We've created a kind of 3D model for the site, changed kind of roofscapes to make sure that we've pulled build product forward to the road to make it a lovely kind of active, colourful frontage. But then actually what you do is you maximise the kind of garden space to the rear and give it that kind of positive kind of health and well-being that we're looking for. A lot of our houses, if you've managed to see any of the internal floor plans, they now have dedicated internal office spaces so that we can do hopefully what we're doing just now. And if I've got the wee one working beside me or playing beside me, we can do that and we can all successfully work from home. So real positive things that I hope we've done with the layout in terms of getting new coverage, new house styles and brought forward. And it's great to know that we've got the support of Angus Council for that too. If I can pick up on a couple of the issues raised, I think you're absolutely right. We hadn't completed the LEAP area just yet with the local area of equipped. We're looking to move that compound position up to the kind of top corner, so it kind of bounds, I suppose, Bearfield Road and Seaton Road. That would give a good kind of access egress point, keeping you totally away from any occupied properties. So that means that you can backfeed, people can live in their homes and no way are we ever crossing over with any kind of construction traffic. So yeah, that was a big move that we had to do as part of the designs. In terms of this kind of LEAP, this area of equipped area, it's pretty much central to the whole site. So the area that you're looking in question just now, it's probably only 50, 100 metres away from where this LEAP area is going to be. And with that construction compound move, hopefully happening soon, if not now, then that allows that to be formed, occupied. And as you quite rightly say, we've got our own internal kind of health and safety audits with our own construction team. And we've got kind of fenced off area, which has to be fully complete to the SUDS area. And that's all still to be finalised and completed. And that will all happen, as I say, once this construction move comes to fruition. We need to be sensitive with that, and that's why I think we want to kind of remain in close contact with Angus Council, because I think when you have to look holistically about how play space, open space, SUDS areas all linked together, we don't want to just put a complete fence round about it, because you know what, if kids want to get in there, they will climb the fences and go in there, and actually sometimes the best thing is actually be able to keep an eye on the kids and make sure they're not in any trouble or distress. So we've got a bit of work to do there. Sorry, of course. So as I say, look, real positive moves were made here. Hopefully you can support us on this one, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have as well. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Craig. I think Craig's probably asked some of the questions, answered some of the questions we had already, but however, questions to Craig. We'll have Councillor King, followed by Councillor Durno.
Thank you, Convener. Just looking at the plan and the information supplied to us, it's my understanding that all these houses are two-storey. I'm welcoming the situation that you're bringing forward more houses, but I don't see any bungalow-style houses for people who want to downsize out of two-storey property into a single-flatted property with a garden and what have you. It doesn't seem to provide any facility for those of similar age to myself who might be looking to move out of a traditional property into a bungalow.
It's a fair comment. We're asked probably quite a lot about bungalows. We have and can do these type of things. As part of this kind of remix, I suppose, that we've done to the northern area at Earls Mather Avenue, this is really one part of a stepping stone. What we would like to do, if we get good progress from today, is relook again at the original consent to 2010 for the 30-40 units to the south side of Earl Matthew, and hopefully do something very, very similar to you've suggested. As I say, we've had a look in our portfolio, and I have some designs there in terms of a 1-bedroom kind of home, and that kind of downsizer idea. And it's something that I think we've already had some initial contact with both Murray Agnew and Rory Kelly in terms of something we'd like to bring to the fore for potentially the next phase.
Councillor Durno.
Right, thanks for the presentation, Craig. Getting back to the studs again, I actually did my studs training, so I do know there is covers you can get to put on studs. They're kind of like a chicken sort of mesh. That's what I was sort of talking about, not particularly a fence, because I've had neighbours' children here, age 2, that have gotten out the gates and are halfway down the road. So I know you're saying about people watching their children, but toddlers are quite initiative about getting out, and you're going to have more houses there. So also another problem that I've had with your development is I've had complaints, and I had to see about getting dog bins put in through the council, because obviously people think that the council will provide dog bins on private property, and we don't. So is that something maybe you could work with the council officers and providing more dog bins, because everybody in the world's got a dog at the moment. And it's just these little problems that I get on a day-to-day basis. Might sound a bit sort of nippy sweetie to people, but it is constant on these new developments, and it's maybe sometimes an afterthought. So if there's something you could think about for dogs and children, that would be very much appreciated. And thanks for building new houses, because we really need them in our growth.
Thank you.
Craig, was there a question there?
I suppose a bit like you, I've got a 17-month-old son, so yeah, you're absolutely right. My toddler, he runs about, and you know, having good quality footpaths, shared surface areas, play spaces, these are all vitally important. And I share that. I actually live next to it's actually a physical pond, and it's that same thing about trying to teach them the rights and the wrongs. So look, things move on, things change very rapidly, and look, happy to work with anyone in this one. If we can do this as far more successful, happy to do that. In terms of, you'll see hopefully that we are positive. We are trying to make more established footpath connections. And I think you've got to be quite sensitive where you do kind of dog bins. But I think we have the opportunity there that if you actually look along Bearfield Road, there's houses kind of facing the opposite direction. You've got a bit of landscape edge there as well. I don't see any issues why we could put 1 or 2 dog bins, because if you get them in the right place, it does its world of good rather than clogging up some of the little bins in the main road.
Councillor Brace, followed by Councillor Moore.
Yes, thanks, convener. There have been concerns raised about the availability of parking, and Mr. Hunter did address that in his presentation, and we're assured that it does comply with our policy on parking. But I do note that that you tell us that some of these houses, at least, it's going to be possible at a future date to convert the garage into a coach house. That, of course, creates a separate residence, and the possibility of more parking being required. Now, of course, anything like that would require planning permission, and the parking would be provision would be considered at the application stage. But I just wondered if you have considered the parking when you're sort of promoting the idea that in the future conversions could be made to create other residences.
No, absolutely right. I mean, as you see, there's a kind of national, it's got a Scots Roads design guidance. And effectively, that's exactly what it sets out. And what we've done in collaboration with Andy Barnes from Roads is, if you actually look in detail on our site plan, there's a parking provision plan that's actually a submitted drawing that we hope to be able to get approved. And you'll see that whether it's a 2-bed or a 3-bedroom home, we've allowed a minimum of 2 parking spaces, and whether it's 4 or 5, you have a minimum of 3 spaces. So some of the bigger, the larger, we've got a couple of 5-bedroom houses there. Actually, forget about the garage, you can still fit at least 4 cars in some of these driveways. So yes, we absolutely thought about that, because what we don't want to do is certainly don't want to clog up the kind of spine road at Earls Matthew Avenue. And again, I think that was one of the big drivers that led to the recommendation for approval here.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, convener. Yes, Mr. McKinley, I hate to contradict Councillor Durno, but I don't have a dog. There's discussion about a travel plan. We want to be serious about getting people onto public transport and the like. Would it not be better, rather than giving them a copy of a travel plan, to say give them a bus pass for 6 months so that they can get used to using the buses, and then they get into the habit by the time that bus pass expires? That's one question. The other question, we get on a lot of other sites, we get requests for salt bins, and developers put salt bins out on the sites, and then when the developer leaves, they take the salt bins with them, and then we get unhappy residents. If you got requests for salt bins, would you provide them? And if so, would you leave them when you...
Okay, the one about the bus passes, that's totally new in me. I've never really thought about that one before. We tried a number of exercises where we talked about, you know, when you talk about like vehicle charging points or maybe promoting cycling, that was certainly something we looked at a lot in the past. I generally, I'm not quite sure how to answer the question on the buses. I think for me, in terms of design and layout and what we do, you know, to have pedestrian routes that kind of go through the site, have a good active travel network, have colourful house types that give you kind of navigational, kind of visual cues as you go through. I think they're all incumbent and something that we should be definitely doing as a developer. I'm not quite sure what else I can say certainly about the bus passes. In terms of the grip bins, you're probably absolutely right that in terms of when roads are installed, we would always, as a matter of course, put out the little kind of grit salt bins, because it would be up to the developer to maintain any of these roads up until they're offered for adoption and then finally adopted by the local authority. And as you say, it's usually that point that probably, if not a year to 18 months after the development's finished, and hopefully the roads are in acceptable condition to be adopted, you're right, we would take the grip bins off, because effectively that's been passed upon to the local authority. I don't see any hassle in us leaving the grip bins there. I don't think we've got a problem with that at all. It would be something maybe for roads, for maybe Andy Barnes to think, let us know how he feels.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions to Craig? No other questions? Okay, thank you, Craig, for that presentation. Move on to comments. Councillor Durno, comments?
Yes, I'd just like to say that, I mean, I do welcome the development, because we really do need some more new houses on our road. And I just hope the developer will take into consideration some of the points that I've put up regarding safety of the SUD development. Well, sorry, the SUD development's there already, but if the developer will take in consideration that the comments that I've made on the SUDs for safety reasons, and more dog bins, etc. And I do welcome the fact that we're going to have the new pathway, because it's really needed at Berryfields Road. So thank you for that.
Councillor Brace?
Yes, I do note that the original application was for a certain number of houses, and this application is for a higher number of houses on the same site, and also the new proposal is to build the houses in such a way that at least some of the garages can be converted in future to further residences. So, you know, over the years, we might land up with a lot more houses on that site than the original application was for. However, we have to look at this application. Any further creation of residences would be subject to another planning permission, so I don't suppose it's really relevant at this stage.
Councillor King? You're muted, Councillor King.
Yes, I'm just getting off mute. Thank you, convener. Yes, convener. I tend to welcome the increase in housing here because the increase is generated by lower cost, smaller housing. And there is a shortage of lower cost, smaller housing in Arbroath at the moment. There's a lot of housing going up, but it all tends to be in the 3, 4, 5 bedroom size. They are quite expensive comparatively, and it doesn't give young families on a limited income the opportunity to move into private housing, which most of us have done at some time in our lives. People get their feet on the ladder and hopefully move into a 3 or 4 or 5 bedroom house later on in their lives. But to get that first stage of moving into an affordable house of a suitable size is important. And, you know, the smaller houses, even 1 bedroom ones for single people, are very useful. So I'm quite happy with the increase in number on this. It's providing the additional 7 houses are providing a facility that wasn't in the original development and that is needed in Arbroath.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I agree with Councillor King. We need the housing. Smaller houses are a very good idea to get the youngsters onto the ladder. It looks a good development so far. I trust that it will maintain the same standard. I would be very interested in the developer looking at possibly modifications to the travel plan to encourage more use. And I think it's worth supporting.
Thank you. Any other comments? No other comments. Well, I'm quite happy to move the support. I've taken on board all the comments and agree with what's been said. What we're looking at, there's already planning consent for 39 houses and we're increasing it to 46. So therefore, I'll be moving this report for conditional approval. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Therefore, on the application for 46 houses at Butte Drive and Arbroath is conditionally approved. Application number is application number 21/001. That is approved. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay, now move on to item application number 10, which I'll say vacating the chair as normal. So hope to get signed out.
Convener, if you just leave the meeting and someone will be in touch when you finish that item, please. Thank you. And the same for Councillor Nicholl as well, please. Just bear with me a second, members. I'm just going to make sure that Councillor Nicholl has gone. His picture was jumping all over the screen there, so I just want to make sure that he's no longer there yet. I think he's gone. So yes, members, in terms of standing orders, both the convener and vice convener have declared the interest and left the meeting. So I therefore seek nominations for a member to chair the meeting for this item.
This is Forsyth.
Councillor Fotheringham, yes.
Can I propose Councillor Ian McLaren, please?
And could I second that?
Okay. Is there any other nomination? No, I don't see anything else. Okay. Councillor McLaren.
Right, thank you. This is agenda item number 10, and this is a full planning application for the erection of 5 dwellings, garages and associated works on land to the rear of Fairley Watson Street, Letham. Could we please see the slides, Mr. Hunter? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McLaren. As you've indicated, we have a full planning application for the erection of 5 houses and associated works at Watson Street in Letham. Extract from the local development plan map, application site just identified in the red area that we see to the right-hand side of the screen. So members will note from the report before you that we have an unadopted roads policy in Letham, policy L1 in the local development plan, and it indicates that all decisions in relation to new development proposals within the village will be considered in the context of that unadopted roads policy. Now, Appendix 5 of the local development plan identifies Watson Street as an unadopted road. What it does do is indicate that the road is in reasonable condition, and it identifies that fields to the east of Watson Street itself, so in the area that we see, which includes the application site, may be suitable for development where they comply with other relevant policies of the plan. So in terms of the unadopted roads policy itself, this is an area that's anticipated to see additional development. Looking at the application site in a little bit more detail, we have Watson Street itself located to the left-hand side of the site, access taken between the property at Fairlea and the property at 10A Watson Street. See the site, some contours on this. So the site slopes very gently down towards the track that runs along the south boundary of the site. And we have existing properties at Green Hills located just to the west of the site itself. In a little bit more detail, we see the proposed development itself. New access formed between the two existing properties, and we have the fine site. Now those are dwellings that you can see the plots are comparable with the plot sizes within the surrounding area. And you can see as well, maybe from this slide, that there's a reasonable distance between the proposed houses and the existing properties, both to the west of the site and to the east of the site at Green Hills. So the separation distances that we're looking at here comply with the spatial standards in the council's design guidance. Looking at the house type, this is the house types on plots 1 and 2, so 1.5 storey properties, the upper floor accommodation served by roof lights, no windows at first floor level within the gables that you see on the elevations before you. This is the elevation on plot 1 that would face the neighbouring property at Fairlea, and the separation distance between windows at ground floor is around about 19 to 20 metres to existing ground floor windows, existing hedging, and a proposal for a 1.8 metre high fence to help safeguard the privacy of the existing property. Upper floor windows, the roof lights that you see here, minimum of 12 metres from the boundary with the property at Fairlea. So again, consistent with our design guidance. Plot 3 property, again, 1.5 storeys. This is the south elevation, so it's the kitchen window that we see here that would be facing at a slightly oblique angle the property at Green Hills. Again, separation distance of about 13.5 metres, so a distance that complies with our design guidance. And you can see the elevations that we have. This would be the elevation facing the properties at Green Hill. You can see no upper floor windows within that gable, and we have conditions that remove permitted development rights, preventing formation of any additional upper floor windows to help safeguard the amenity of the nearest neighbours. On plots 4 and 5, again, 1.5 storey properties, fairly consistent theme between the buildings that you can see here, and the elevation facing the closest neighbour just identified at the bottom of the screen here. So garage closest to the neighbouring property at 10A Watson Street, and again it's a blank elevation in that gable that's closest to the boundary with the neighbouring property. So again, compliant with the spatial standards in terms of relevant separation distances. An aerial view, you see Watson Street itself, the East Hemmond Street located just to the top left-hand side of the screen, so leading into the centre of the village. Watson Street itself running down, access to the site taken between the two properties that you see here, and the extent of the site just identified with the cursor. We do have a track that runs to the south of the site, and again you'll see there are conditions proposed that seek to remove any permitted development rights that would allow for formation of any vehicular access onto that track. So very much directing traffic to utilise the Watson Street, which is in accordance with the Council's approved unadopted roads policy for the village. Looking east along Watson Street itself, access to the site located just in the mid-ground of the photograph that you can see here. So you can make out Watson Street in reasonable condition, reasonable width, and with street lighting. So one of the streets within the village, it's unadopted, but the unadopted roads policy recognises its reasonable condition and anticipates development to the east. Again, just looking in the opposite direction, we have the Fairlea property and 10A. So you can see a mix of house styles. 10A with the 1.5 storey type accommodation, fairly modern looking property, and access to the site just taken in at the point here. Looking at the access, we have Fairlea located to the north, 10A located to the south, and you can see the fence, maybe around about 1.8 metres in height, providing some separation between the proposed access and the Fairlea property. And just looking slightly different angle, we have a doorway that leads into the Fairlea property, and you can see the screening provided by the existing fence. Looking at the eastern boundary, you can see the gable of the existing property, a property that's been fairly substantially altered in the past. We have a footway that runs the length of the eastern boundary, so a footway that separates the properties to the east from the application site itself. The proposed house on plot 3 sitting maybe round about the position that we see here, so not affecting the property in the mid-ground, and adequate separation distance to the property located just at the right-hand side of the screen. Looking just in the opposite direction from that southeast corner, you can see the boundary, the western boundary of this site, the Fairlea property sitting behind some hedging, the property at 10A, again some landscaping within the curtilage of that property, and a 1.8 metre high fence that again will provide some amenity protection for the occupants of that property. But it's a blank gable that's facing the blank garage gable on the proposed house that's facing that neighbouring property. Again, property at number 10, you can see it's got a window that faces the application site, but the proposed house located some distance beyond that property. So again, probably a 20 metre separation distance at an oblique angle between that window and the closest property that's proposed. Again, on this slide, you can see there is a slope on the site, and you'll see that residents have raised some concerns regarding flood risk. Information in relation to the suitability of the site to accommodate soakaways has been provided by an engineer, and that indicates that it should be acceptable. Notwithstanding that, you'll note there are conditions that require further information in relation to drainage, just to ensure that there is no adverse impact on the amenity of the closest properties. Again, just looking over the site from this time the northeast corner, again you're looking back towards the property at 10A, and you can see a variety of house types. So the house styles proposed reasonably consistent with what's in the area at the present time. It's consistent with the pattern of the development in the area. It's a site that the local plan potential for development in terms of the unadopted roads policy. The proposal complies with the local plan, it complies with our spatial standards, and it's recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Do we have any questions to the officer? Councillor Moore?
Thank you, convener. Yes. What is the height of plot 5 to the ridge? We don't seem to have any measurements.
I don't know the height of the plot specifically, but it's a 1.5 story style property, and I would anticipate it's going to be similar in height to the property at 10A, which is similarly a 1.5 story property. But in terms of separation distances, the separation distances comply with the council's policy, and you'll note that for the house on plot 5, the part of the dwelling that's closest to the neighbouring property is the garage, where the ridge steps down to the lower height associated with the garage itself.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether a sun plan has been done, because when you get towards the winter sun is fairly low. How much will that plot 5 impact on the living room of 10A?
So we're satisfied that given the orientation of the plots, there should be no significant impact on daylight. There is guidance in relation to daylight impacts, and you'll notice that the majority of the garden area for the property at 10A has a reasonably open aspect to the east. Any impact on that property is most likely to arise from the planting within its own garden area.
Right, and the unadopted roads policy for Watson Street says there is limited potential for individual infill. How does individual get defined in this matter?
So I think the wording for Watson Street indicates possible backland in field on east side and limited potential for individual infill. So I think that's two distinct things. It's identifying there is potential within the fields and there is potential for individual infill. Two separate things, Councillor Moore.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any other questions to the officer?
No further questions.
Any comments on the application? Councillor Moore, followed by Councillor King.
Thank you, convener. Yes, I do have concerns. I have had comments made to me regarding flooding on this site. It seems to be a sump to take off some of the water in the area. I'm concerned that if we allow a road and 5 properties with the garages, with the sheds that will be put up, you know, we are increasing the possibility for flooding in this area. I'm concerned about the impact on Watson Street. We're talking about 5 big houses, probably 10 cars. I mean, plot 5's got space for 3 parking. That is a reasonable amount of traffic that is going to suddenly come out onto Watson Street. I'd be tempted if I could find a policy to move refusal on it, but I can't find a policy, therefore I will reluctantly say, you know, I can't refuse it, so I'll support approval.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor King.
Thank you, Councillor McLaren. Unlike Councillor Moore, I think this is a very good use of the land in this particular area. I presume that all these houses are going to be connected to the main sewer, so therefore perhaps there will actually be a reduction in the flood potential from the field. I take note of the comments that have been made by the objectors in terms of the unadopted roads and the policy and the unadopted roads. And I am concerned the fact that Watson Street does have a connection onto East Blair's Road. If that was to start being used as a way out from any more than it is at the moment, I would become concerned. There is nothing in this application or in the comments from the Roads Department regarding the unsuitability of East Blair's Road as a public thoroughfare. And I would really like to see East Blair's Road made one way from the Den northwards, and big signs at the top end of it saying no access. It would be inconvenient for some of the people that live at the top of East Blair's Road, but it would certainly make it one heck of a lot safer in terms of strangers to the town being directed down there by sat-nav. Similarly, we should make it from the top of the hill, just short of where these houses are, make the access from East Blair's Road into Watson Street should always be one way up the hill, so that people are not tempted to drive down the hill to leave. I know that this is not a planning matter, but I see that Andy Barnes was wanting to come in after me. He's dropped his hand down, but I would just like to hear why the Roads Department are not considering these road restrictions. I know they're on adopted roads, but on a road safety point of view nowadays, we should really be looking at making access to East Blair's Road down to the Den much more difficult than it is for the possible, especially for vehicles that don't belong to Witham.
Thank you for that, Councillor King. I would imagine that Andy Barnes will be noting your comments. Do you want to reply on that, Mr. Barnes?
Thanks, convener. Yeah, sorry, Councillor King, I didn't have my hand up, but I'm quite happy to respond in any case. Yes, we didn't consider that for only 5 houses that there would be much access required from East Blair's Road. You know, it's more convenient to go out via East Hemming Street or West Hemming Street at the top. But I'm certainly happy to take your suggestions forward and have a look at whether or not we should make East Blair's Road one way.
Good.
Are there any other comments on this application?
No further comments, Councillor McLaren.
Well, I will be moving this report for approval with conditions attached. Do we agree?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Report number 21/00131 is approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McLaren. If you could, members could just bear with me, and I'll get the convener and vice convener back into the meeting. We'll have the vice convener back. We're just waiting on the convener.
Okay, you hear me now?
Yes, convener.
Made it eventually. Okay, move on to agenda item 11, land at Lantratham Primary School. This is for an agricultural building. Could we have the slides, please?
Thank you again, convener. This time an application for full planning permission for the erection of an agricultural building and associated works on land close to the former Lantratham Primary School at Bridge End of Lantratham. Just a drawing that shows the approximate location of the site. Sits just to the south of Bridge End of Lantratham, identified in the area roughly by the circle on the screen. There is some reference in letters of representation to the possibility of locating the building elsewhere, specifically at Peel Farm. And just to give some context, Peel Farm is located maybe around about 2.5 kilometres to the west of the application site itself. But on this drawing, we have Bridge End of Lantratham located to the north, and we have the former Lantratham Primary School located just to the south of the application site. In a little bit more detail, we see the application site itself, the red line identified on the plan before you, and we have the former school located just a short distance to the south. There is a planning permission that allows for the conversion of one of the existing buildings within the former school to a house, and the separation distance between that property and the boundary of the site would be around about 50 metres, then maybe around about 70 metres from that property to the proposed agricultural building itself. But an improved access formed from the public road that runs to the west of the site into the application site itself to serve the cattle court building, general purpose agricultural building that would be proposed. In a little bit more detail, you can see the track that would be formed, a soakaway formed just to the north of the property, and the agricultural building itself around about 900 square metres in area, and a yard area located in association with the building itself. Entire area you can perhaps just make out enclosed by a metre-high stock-proof fence. Here we see the building itself, fairly standard cattle court style building, open on the southwest elevation, and a storage area for the keeping of feed, bedding, associated equipment located at one end of the property. You can perhaps also make out on this drawing the red line, which just shows existing ground levels. So you can perhaps make out the intention is to dig the building down into the existing landform in order to provide the flat level for construction and in order to help minimise its impact on the wider landscape. We have some cross-section drawings that just show the shed in the context of the surrounding ground levels. Section A to A is roughly round about the track access. So you can see at that point reasonable screening of the building. The section C to C taken from the proximity of the house that will be formed through the conversion. So just round about this point looking in a northeast direction, and you can see again the landform, the building being cut into the landform should reduce its visual impact from that location. And we have a section D to D, which is roughly the area here, and you can see from the northwest the building will be open to view, but that's at some distance in relation to the settlement of Bridgend of Llantrafan itself, maybe around about 200 metres from the closest property in Llantrafan up to the building itself. And you can see in this image, set against the backdrop of existing trees in that area. So just an aerial photograph. We have the properties at Bridgend of Llantrafan in the top left-hand corner of the screen. Access into the site taken from the existing field entrance just round about this area. Soakaway located just round about here. And the building itself occupying the area that we see in here, just identified by the cursor. The former Llantrafan School itself located at the bottom of the screen, so a short distance between the two buildings. But as you've seen, landform, existing vegetation provides some screening in relation to that potential view. This is looking from the entrance to the site towards Llantrafan, distance of maybe around about 160 metres to the boundary of the closest property that you can just make out the roof of. So maybe a drop in height around about 10 metres, maybe 14 metres from this point to the property, the closest property to the north. Separation distance between the access to the house itself, closer to 180 metres. So reasonable separation distance from the access to the properties within Llantrafan village itself. Looking across the site, proposed building located just in the centre ground that you can see here, and you get an impression of the excavation that would take place in order to help mitigate the impact of the building within the landform. And you can see the vegetation that would provide a backdrop in relation to views from the north, and also provide screening in relation to properties that lie to the south at the former Llantrafan Primary School. This is just a photograph looking from the location of the building back towards Llantrafan. So at this point, maybe separation distance around about 200 metres to the closest properties. There are concerns from residents at Llantrafan regarding the impact of the agricultural building on concerns are raised regarding matters such as artificial lighting. And you'll see we have conditions proposed that deal with artificial lighting. There are conditions proposed that require an odour management plan. But at the distances proposed, our environmental health colleagues are satisfied that impact should not be significant. And the separation distances in this case are not untypical of those that we commonly find in rural Angus. Our policies are generally supportive of new agricultural buildings. This is a rural location. The siting is considered acceptable in terms of its wider landscape impact. Its siting is considered acceptable in terms of potential impacts on amenity subject to the conditions that are before you. Finally, just a slide. This is taken from the south, so this is looking back towards Llantrafan School, the schoolhouse itself. Proposed building, maybe just sitting behind the ridge line that you can see in this area. This slide may be taken from roughly 120 metres from the proposed building. It will be visible in the wider landscape, but it's an agricultural building. It's a landscape where agricultural buildings are typical. Siting is considered acceptable in relation to amenity, in relation to landscape impacts, all subject to the conditions that are before you. But the proposal is recommended for approval.
Mr. Allen. Councillor Brace.
Councillor Brace, your microphone's still muted.
Right, sorry. Thanks, convener. I may have missed it in the papers, but I don't see any details of the length and width of the building. Rather, only we get the height of the apex. But is that detail not required for this application, or do you have have any indication of the length and width?
Absolutely. I didn't specify that in the presentation, but the building is 15 metres wide and 60 metres long.
Right, thank you.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, convener. Yes, following on from that, I'm just intrigued by how many animals could you get into there? We're talking about an odour management plan. How many cows or whatever would you fit in there? Because it seems to be a fairly large area.
I will hold my hands up, Councillor Moore, and say absolutely beyond my area of expertise. But we are satisfied that the separation distances involved, we're looking at nearly 200 metres from the building to the properties to the north, and about 70 metres from the building to the closest dwellings to the south. So distances that are certainly not unusual in the context of rural Angus, and distances that our environmental health colleagues are satisfied should not give rise to unacceptable impacts on the amenity of those that live nearby.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No other questions, comments?
Convener, we have Mrs. Frankie, the agent, speaking on this one.
Yes, okay. Right, could we have the agent, please? Are you?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, Marius. Yes.
Thank you. Good morning, convener, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Maria Franke. I'm the planning consultant, and I'm here to represent the applicant CS Fleming and Son in their proposals for the erection of the cattle shed at Lintrathen. The approval of this application will support an established farming business to overwinter its cattle indoors between the months of November to May. It's a proposal that will help to support and sustain the rural economy in accordance with the development strategy of your adopted local plan and the policies of SPP, which encourage sustainable rural development. I'd like to raise a few points this morning. The first is the reason for siting the shed in the proposed location at Lintrathen, and the second is to respond to some of the amenity concerns raised by local residents. So the reason for siting the shed in the proposed location is that it will quite simply be adjacent to the fields where the cattle graze. It avoids using prime quality agricultural land, and the building is needed to enable all the cattle to be winter housed. The proposed shed will provide spacious and airy accommodation to improve animal welfare. And in response to Councillor Moore's point, it's for about 50 calving cows and their calves. So approximately you could have 100 head of cattle. This is a rural area, and the cattle shed is an appropriate use in this location, meeting an operational farming requirement and reducing the transport of livestock by float to buildings further afield. In terms of amenity concerns raised by the local residents, any adverse impact of the shed on the local environment will be suitably mitigated. Regarding visual impact, as you've seen from the slides, the topography of the site will shield the two closest residential properties to the southwest from any view of the cattle shed, and the buffer of coniferous trees on the eastern boundary of the site will also help to further provide a screen and noise buffer. It's a functional agricultural building, and its design adheres to the Council's advice note on farm buildings. In terms of the views of the shed from the north at Bridge End of Lintrathen, the applicant is happy to accept the proposed planning condition for additional planting, which will help mitigate the visual impact. In terms of odour impact, the building is dry. It's bedded with straw and will be cleaned out on a regular basis. The waste will be taken from the site and used on the applicant's surrounding farmland in full accordance with the rules for the storage and disposal of manures. The Council's Environmental Health Service has no objection to the proposals, subject to planning conditions for an odour management plan and the details of the water supply connection, both of which the applicant is happy to comply with. As a final point, the applicant also wishes to highlight to the committee that he is classed as a young farmer, and trying to keep young people in the industry and encourage more young people to begin farming is a significant challenge across Scotland and the UK. This development will make a massive difference to the business going forward, and your support for this application will not only help the future competitiveness of the business, but also assist the applicant in carrying on in the farming industry. Thank you for your time.
Right, thank you. Any questions? Councillor Breeze.
Thanks, convener, and thanks, Maria, for your presentation. I just wondered, can you give us an indication of how much land surrounds the proposed building?
Yeah, there are a number of fields that are owned by the applicant in the vicinity of Lintrathen and Clintlaw. I think they're shown in on the site plan that Alan Hunter showed you. So there's an area of around about sort of 100 acres in total between Bridgend of Lintrathen and then another area around Pill Farm, and the cattle graze predominantly around Lintrathen.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Maria. Okay. Now, can we move on to comments now?
No comments.
No comments. No comments. Right. No comments. Right, I'm quite happy to move this report. This is a very well planned building and will be out of sight to a certain extent, and it's required area land that's been described to us as would accommodate that number of cattle in that shed. So I'm quite happy to move this report with the conditions that are attached. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Hereby, application 11, number 234/21 is conditionally approved. Is that agreed? Move on to the three application notices that we have. The first one is application for a development at north of Victoria Street, Monifeith. Alan, do you have slides on this?
I do, convener, thank you. As you've indicated, this is a proposal of application notice which relates to a proposed application for residential development on land at Victoria Street, Monifeith. Extract from the local development, we have the development boundary for Monifeith identified in black, just in the area identified by the cursor, and the proposed site lies out with but adjacent to that boundary, so just of Monifeith in the area that we see identified by the cursor. If I move on in a little bit more detail, we have the applicant or the proposed application site identified in red on this plan, and you can make out the area identified in blue, which is the area that's currently being developed by Taylor Wimpey Homes for housing development just at the north of Monifeith. So this is an indication that an application may be submitted in the near future for residential development on the area identified in red. And this is seeking early indication from committee of issues that you would wish to see addressed as and when an application comes forward. Again, proposed site identified in the area that we see here, so reasonably close to the A92 dual carriageway, and you'll see at paragraph 4.8 of the report before you, that's one of the issues that's picked out as a matter that requires consideration, just potential impacts in relation to proximity to the dual carriageway. The other issue being issues associated with proximity to the Monifeith quarries. And you can see the extent of Ethy Beaton quarry located just to the top of the screen here. So we have Ethy Beaton quarry and our Downey quarry again to the north of the site. So those specific issues that relate to this. The other issues are identified at paragraph 4.8 to housing land supply, suitability of the environment that would be created, and whether there's any justification for development out with but adjacent to a development boundary at this stage. But the generality of the issues we consider appropriate for a large-scale housing development of this nature identified at 4.8 of the report.
Alan, members have any issues that we might want to bring forward at this stage? Councillor King?
Sorry, convener, my mute didn't want to come off there. I'm fairly familiar with this site. I drove past it for 20 odd years every day we went to work. In my recollection, the west end of that site is very low in comparison to the east end of the site. There's quite a dip in there. It would concern me that the drainage matters on that site should be addressed. You've already addressed the question of the A92, because of course that roundabout is where the A92 becomes a 70-mile-an-hour national speed limit road, as opposed to the 40 miles an hour Dobbies. So there will be quite a bit of noise of traffic coming from the road. Plus the fact there's no indication anywhere of where the developer would be intending to take access to the site. So these are all matters that I would like to see addressed in any eventual planning application coming forward.
Right, thank you, Councillor King. Any other member have any issues they want to bring forward? Well, there's no other issues. We'll move on to the next plan proposal application notice for a residential development of 245 dwelling houses, including 25 affordable, Garth Farm, Kirrymuir Road, Forfar. Alan.
Thank you again, convener. Another proposal of application notice, as you've indicated, again for residential development, this time on land north of Garth Farm, Kirrymuir Road, Forfar. Local plan extract map, the extent of the proposed site this time located just roughly in the area that I'm identifying with the cursor at the present time. So again, we have the development boundary for Forfar as defined by the local development plan. The proposed site lies out with but adjacent to that boundary. In a little bit more detail, you can see the proposed site just identified by the red line that we see here. So again, a circumstance where we have existing housing development taking place to, in this case, the east of the site. And indication is that an application may be submitted for housing development, the area identified by the red line on the slide before you. Just looking at an aerial view, again, applications roughly in the area that we see identified by the cursor. Very similar issues picked out in relation to this application as have been identified in relation to the proposal at Monifeith. It's out with, it's adjacent to the development boundary, so issues will be relevant in relation to justification to develop out with the development boundary, issues in relation to infrastructure capacity. Particular issue picked out in this case is proximity to Garth Farm. agricultural use at that building. So again, just issues that require to be considered would be impacts in relation to amenity from the proximity of that to in this case. But the general issues identified at paragraph 4.8 of the report before you.
Any issues at this stage by any of the members? We have Councillor King, followed by Councillor Duff.
Councillor King, your microphone hasn't come off mute, sorry.
I seem to have having problems this morning with muting. Sorry, I'll start again. I'm looking at page 240. I presume it's a footpath that extends in a long pigtail from the south of the site. Can I ask, is there any indications of what maintenance agreements are going to be put in place on that footpath for the future?
At the moment, Councillor King, is a proposal of application notice, so we have no real detail beyond the information that's provided to you today in relation to the general location of the site, the extent of the site and the nature of the development that's proposed. But certainly in terms of dealing with any application that comes forward, one of the matters we would be looking at would be the measures that are in place for maintenance of any unadopted infrastructure, whether that's footpaths, roadways, drainage infrastructure, etc.
Councillor Duff, followed by Councillor Breeze.
Yeah, thank you, convener. Yeah, I mean, just Mr. Hunter has identified some of the infrastructure issues in under 4.8. I would raise just two issues. One, obviously, this is outside the development boundary, and I would be concerned about the distance of this housing from the nearest primary school. Obviously, it's close to the secondary school, but from quite a long distance from probably the nearest primary school. That I think that would be an issue. I'm also led to believe that there are issues with the medical supplies for GP practices, etc. I know that's one that's sometimes contentious in a planning matter, but that's one that's been drawn to my attention as well.
Right, thank you. Councillor Breeze.
Well, thanks, convener. Councillor Duff has raised the points that I'd like to be carefully considered, so thank you.
Right. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, convener. Yes, when we considered the planning application to the east of this site, we were also looking at the speed on the road where the access will be taken from, and I'd like to have consideration taken of whether the 40-mile-an-hour speed limit would have to be extended, which would go right up to the roundabout for the A90.
Any other members have any issues at this stage? Councillor Duff, do you want to come back again?
Yeah, just really a following on, convener, just a bit of a point of information on Councillor Moore's comments. My understanding was what we have already agreed that the 40-mile-an-hour zone should go to the roundabout on the A90. So that was approved, I think, from memory after a site visit with Mr. Cochrane some time ago.
Right. Thank you for that comment. Any other issues that members want to bring forward? Well, there's nothing at this moment. That concludes our business for today. So we'd just like to thank all members for attending and their contributions to this meeting. Thank you.